Hello, lovely learneds. Welcome back to ALifeLearned. It's been a while. I've been busy and distracted, we'll just say that. Lots of video ideas coming up all the time, but doing other things. But we've had a big enough change in life that I figured why not share. Well, in case you guys weren't aware, I'm sure you are, ODSP sucks! Ontario Disability Support Program, to be specific. It's so interesting when I talk to people about the different programs that I've dealt with, like OW or ODSP, and when they aren't from my socio-demographic, I get a lot of, what's that? Could you explain the acronym for me? And I'm like, right, there are people in this world who don't know what OW stands for because they didn't grow up as a welfare baby. Anyways, so to all those Canadians, specifically all those Ontarians, who felt that it was a good idea to continue to vote in the Doug Ford Conservative government, you were wrong, just so you know. I won't get too into my personal opinions on that factor, but I think evidence really presents itself pretty clear. You know, you can't argue with the numbers. And the fact of the matter is, this government that we currently have in Ontario, the Conservative government, got a surplus. They produced a surplus of $2.1 billion. $2.1 billion. Surplus of $2.1 billion in the recent fiscal year. I will put articles down below to provide you with the proof. The reason this is so upsetting is because they have literally gutted our social services to create this surplus. Kids have not been going to school, have not been safe going to school. Teachers have been fired. Nurses have been fired. Hospitals are shutting down. Our emergency rooms are shutting down. That literally hasn't happened in all my 32 years. That's not right. $2.1 billion surplus. Social services not being provided for. Where do you think that money should have been going? And other places that he's been gutting is specifically our social services, which is what I started this video with. One thing I just haven't had the energy to pursue, but God, we need someone who does. He gutted the, what's it called? Victim services. I can't remember the actual term for the fund, but it is something I qualified for. And it made a huge impact on helping me just survive, because social services, ODSP, OW, not enough to live on, just not enough. So I signed up or registered for these funds that you qualify for if you've gone through the courts as a victim for any crime. But one thing that Ford also changed, this was actually over a year ago now, I just never got around to talking about it, is they completely removed a person's ability to receive any funding for emotional suffering, basically, which was, they did this because it was the largest section or qualifier that people were paid out for. In my case, I had no work, lost work that I could claim for. I had no proof of the countless items that he stole from me. I had no receipts to show just how much had been taken from me and how much I had suffered. But they recognized from hearing what I'd been through and from the fact that it was a conviction that I had been through extreme emotional suffering. And they even say in their clause, like, we recognize money does not fix this kind of suffering, but we also recognize it helps ease life because life has expenses and they accumulate when you can't work and perform on a regular basis in regular society. And so in my case, I got $21,000, which, to be clear, I did not splurge on. Okay, no, I did splurge a little. That's where I got my equipment for my YouTube channel. So you can call that a splurge, but that was only a few $1,000s, honestly. The rest went to helping me survive. That money lasted a long time because it just sat in my account and I slowly whittled away at it because I needed it to live. And so it made a really freaking big difference. And it helped me pay down debt that I was accumulating because I couldn't afford to live. So that's just one thing that actually didn't directly affect me because I qualified for that emotional suffering. I got that payout. But countless victims going through the system now, going through worse things than I did, are not getting nearly anything at all because they can't claim receipts, basically. And emotional suffering just doesn't count anymore. So that's corrupt. That's wrong. That's a step backwards for victims within our court system. But the reason I'm actually making this video is because this year in particular, they made a new change to OSAP. So I'm going to try and find an article to explain the history of OSAP and ODSP. But the fact of the matter is there was a woman, I believe in Sudbury, in the early 2000s. This might be wrong. Check the article below. But she was accessing OSAP while also being either on OW or I think it was ODSP. And I guess, I mean, back then it wasn't, that was not allowed. Everything was deducted dollar for dollar. And so you were not allowed to educate yourself and go to school, basically. So when ODSP found out that she was receiving OSAP, they completely took away all of her money, all of her coverage, and she died pregnant. She starved to death, I think, or she commit suicide, but she was starving because they took away every penny. And she had no other form of income, and she was trying to go to school to educate herself to get off the system, which is exactly what I'm trying to do. I don't like that I grew up a welfare baby. I don't want to be in this situation. I would like to pay taxes out to afford for people who are not in my position, who can't educate themselves, because not everyone has this kind of privilege. And with all my suffering, I recognize I've had quite a bit of privilege just in being able to go educate myself. And so, not that it's been easy, but anyway, my point is, I learned a few years ago, I don't remember if it was right at the beginning when I went back to school in 2018, but I learned since then that there is a disability grant that is provided to people on ODSP. Sorry, I just realized I didn't finish the story about that lady. So she died, yes, and because she died, they were like, oh no, that's not right. This was probably a human rights violation. Whoops. And they changed the standards. So now you can receive OSAP while on ODSP, but the way they work it is that the systems work together. They're both the government. So now OSAP calculates what are your educational costs specifically. So just books, just tuition, none of the stuff like feeding yourself or rent, that doesn't count. That's not educational costs apparently. And so anything that's educational costs that's calculated, ODSP lets you keep. They don't deduct that from your monthly income. But anything you get above and beyond that educational cost, you basically have to turn down. You have to say, no, I don't want that part of the loan, which can get really complicated when it's coming from multiple different grants, because they're like, well, you can't turn down part of a grant. You have to turn down the whole thing. And if you turn it down, then you basically just renege on the application you originally made for it, and you probably won't ever qualify for it again. So, have fun. So anyway, I learned about this disability grant. I applied for it. It's one of the bigger grants that you can access, and it accounts for a lot of the things that you experience with disability that the average person doesn't, and so it helps makes things more affordable for people in our positions. But it's basically always more than my educational costs, at least more than they are when I'm a full-time student with a full-time course load. Right now I'm considered a full-time student, but I don't have a full course load because, if you guys remember, got terminated from my frickin' placement last semester, well, the winter semester. So I'm now in like an in-between where I'm doing a couple credits to try and help support my Bachelor of Social Work application next year. And I get to go back to Fanshawe in January, give them another $1,500 for nothing, so that I can go work for free to get 360 hours for free. It's going to be great. Yeah, it's awesome. Great system. But anyways, so I'm basically working my fucking ass off, trying to get myself through school, trying to get myself a higher education, so that I can get off of ODSP. That's the goal. That's the whole thing that I'm trying to frickin' do. But the new changes with deductions, The way it was in the past is that this disability grant, the one that's more significant that I learned about in recent years, applied for, got, isn't deducted, or is deducted now. In the past, because it was a grant for disabilities, it was not counted. It was just like the educational costs. They just put it aside and they didn't count it for deductions. Anything above and beyond the disability grant and educational costs, that's what was deducted from you each month. Like they would divide it between the semester. So now, the Ford government decided another way that they can claw on some money is to no longer allow us to keep that disability grant. Now, every penny that you get above educational costs, regardless of whether it's coming from the disability grant or not, is deducted. Every penny. And because my application was really confusing and trying to figure out, you know, when or what or how to do it, I got called like 5 or 6 times, seriously, to update and correct the stupid grant. And so on the last occasion, they were like, oh shit, we have you down as 2 semesters. You're supposed to be down as 1 semester. Well, shorten that and figure that out. What that meant is it reduced the educational costs, but I'm still getting the same grants because of just the way I qualify as being a super poor disabled person. So it cut my educational costs by, like, I think over $1,000. I'm not sure if it was exactly that, but around that. And what this meant, I would have just turned down one of those grants if I had fucking known this. Excuse my French. But what this means is that my worker figured this out this month because of like updates from OSAP or whatever. But I didn't. So I re-downloaded the assessment and it had the same numbers. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I guess they just hadn't updated it yet. So she got updates from OSAP directly that told her that my tuition was much lower, which meant my educational costs were much lower, which meant that I received much more than they knew. And when she recalculated, she's like, yeah, you are receiving $19 more than what we would give you in a check each month. Yeah. So you now owe us. Oh shit, I have to email her again. Fuck. She told me that I could turn down October's money, so I'm obviously going to because I already freaking owe them money. I owe them for September, apparently. Me, the person who's in like well over $20,000 debt. Me, the person who lives in a literal hole in the wall. I owe the government, the rich-ass government, money. Yeah, whatever. Anyways. Because, you know, I'm just a leech on the system. I'm just using everything and abusing everything, and I'm not trying at all. Sorry, I'm just going off on a rant now. But I know you guys get that that's how it feels. All I'm trying to do here, literally every penny that I get above my educational costs goes to paying down that debt that I just mentioned. Because it's always climbing because they just don't give enough to live on. So I'm taking money from Peter and paying Paul, and I realize that's not great. But the point is I'm trying to pay my bills. I'm trying to be a responsible, citizen of society. I'm trying to get off the system. That's my goal. That's what I'm trying to do. And what are they doing? They're like, oh, here, barrier, block, roadblock. Nope, can't do that. Deduction, punishment. And it's just like, okay, I guess I'll just live on your system for the rest of time because that's what you want. I don't know. Anyway, I've clearly been all over the place, and I apologize for the lack of organization or straight, clear message that this video lacked. Can't even say a sentence straight because I'm just so frustrated. But yeah, the long story short is deductions have become much more punishing for anybody who's receiving OSAP, trying to go to school, trying to get the heck off the system. They now deduct every single penny. They do not let us keep our disability grants anymore. And they don't provide absolutely any coverage for emotional suffering for people who are applying for the victim fund that is available through the Social Tribunal of Ontario, something like that. Anyways, there'll be links below to support everything I said, and I'll even provide some links to the applications of that Victims Fund for anybody interested. I've definitely talked about it before in my series for support for survivors. So if you have any interest in that, I will share that playlist below as well. But anyway, just came back on for a little bit to bitch, I guess, to complain about how awful the system is, how it just keeps getting worse, while conservatives are like, look at our surplus, isn't it beautiful? Yeah, people are dying, but look at all this money. So that's where I'm at, frustrated to no end, can't pay my rent. My card that I thought was going to help improve my life is falling apart constantly because I got scammed into a crapper. I'm working a job that's way too hard for me, and I'm trying to pass a couple courses. But like I said, now I can't pay my rent, so I don't really know what the next few months are going to bring. Maybe my car is just going to break down because I need to use the funds from the job that's supporting the car to pay the rent. This is just the reality that people in my situation find themselves in constantly because all we're trying to do is survive, but apparently that's not okay. Yeah, just to be clear, I didn't choose to be disabled, and I never would, and none of us ever would. I would love to just be a regular contributing member of society who got through school normal, who's in a career contributing, that's my preference. I don't want to be here. This is just the way it is, and so on we fight. If you can relate, if you know anyone in my situation, please do share your story below. I really appreciate anyone who shares empathy or can just, get where I'm coming from, and I'm always here to listen if you need a little empathy yourself or just to know that you're not alone. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, do join me again next week or sometime soon when I try to share a little something I've learned or experienced in life.